Thanks for letting me come tonight. I appreciate it. I am affiliated with the Central Mississippi Tea Party. We meet in the Hines
Got
Madison
two chairs up here. Anybody wants
County
to
area.
settle up here? Y'all come sit down.
I'm not an authority on anything, but I'm like you. I believe in citizen government, and I'm the citizen. And so if I'm not actively involved in citizen government, who's going to be? It doesn't make sense to pay people to do something when what they do, and I respect the jobs that our government employees are doing, I really do. But it's still a citizen government. Everybody has to be accountable to somebody. And so that's what it's all about. It's important for us to be involved in government of, by, and for the people. Now, I can tell you what my resume is, and I'm kind of proud of it, because I had a nice, successful professional life. And then I retired. And the Lord said, you're not going to go home and sit on the patio and watch the bird feeders. I have things for you to do. And somehow I got involved in the Tea Party, and nobody was doing any research on Common Core, but we were hearing a lot of rumbling across the nation in other states about Common Core. And I said, hey, I got time, I'll do it. So I'm not an authority, but there are a lot of people across the nation who are more authoritative than I am, who work for some conservative think tanks, who are educators, reformers in education, who are college professors, who have experience in these things, and they've written a lot, and they've researched a lot. So, because this has been an issue across states for so long, there was plenty of research to draw on out there. It was just a matter of pulling it together, examining it, and seeing what kind of sense it made and how it affected us in Mississippi. And so I really consider myself to be something of a town crier, a Paul Revere yelling, the British is coming. And I want everybody else to hear it, because there are probably some good premises that you can learn from Common Core and apply to education. But all in all, it's not a good way, in my opinion, to apply those premises. So we need to understand what it's all about and have a dialogue about it and find out what we need to do next as a state. The Common Core Initiative, there's no getting around it. It was adopted by most states before they had read it. It's never been tested. There's no empirical evidence that it will accomplish what it's supposed to, but it is being exposed across the country for what it is. Now let me tell you, there's a lot of history behind it. There are a lot of entities and people involved and a lot of moving parts. So I may talk really fast. You please try to listen fast, and I hope at the end it'll all kind of come together. It's an education reform movement. It's the proponents describe it as state-led and voluntary. Common Core state standards are really a set of K-12 educational standards. First off, they were in English, language, arts, and math, but the science standards called New Generation Science have been rolled out since then. In 1996, an entity called Achieve Incorporated was formed by the National Governors Association, and 2 years later they undertook a project to develop some national standards and to do some benchmarking. That same year, the Gates Foundation awarded them $2.2 million to those stakeholders to promote these national standards. The NGA and the Council of Chief State School Officers and Achieve wrote Benchmarking for Success, which set forth this whole standards program, and it was funded by the Gates Foundation. So then in 2009, the federal government offered $4.35 billion in Race to the Top grants through the Obama stimulus package to states. That same year, the Gates Foundation, some of their executives were hired by Arnie Duncan to work for the Federal Department of Education. In 2010, Mississippi submitted a Race to the Top grant application, and in doing so, we had to agree to certain stipulations. We had to develop and implement Common Core standards. Now, they're described as college and career ready standards. And That's what we had to agree to adopt. It so happened that at the time, Common Core was in development and almost ready to roll out, was the only set of standards that met the criteria the government set out. So, you know, in essence, they were saying, here, you need to develop, you need to adopt Common Core. So the states also had to develop and implement common assessments. That's the testing instruments that follow the standards. They had to promote and implement the standards and the assessments statewide. Not just implement them, but promote them throughout the school districts statewide. Teachers, principals, performance based on how students performed under the standards. Fully implement a statewide longitudinal data system. So those were the main requirements. Then, March 2010, the Department of Education issued their blueprint for reform, which states that federal funds like Title I are now linked to compliance with national standards. Who's invested in these standards? The Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation has invested about $163 million. Eli Broad, an initial partner in the standards development, $60 million. GE Foundation, which is Jeffrey Immel, they are an investor as well. Some more invested developers are, as we said, National Governors Association, Council of Chief State School Officers, and Achieve. And in combined, these three entities got more than $27 million in grants. You're going to hear a lot of million-dollar numbers in this presentation. And you hear those saying, you follow the money. Who else is a player in Common Core that's invested in it? Well, Department of Education and Arnie Duncan has an investment. Pearson Publishing has an investment. Achieve, of course. In Bloom, PARC, which is one of the assessment consortium, they got $170 million from Gates and federal funds. The other consortium is Smarter Balanced. They got $160 million. Invested in this process on the PR end of it is the Foundation for Excellence in Education. That's Jim Bush's group, the Fordham Institute, the Hunt Institute. They're all on the PR end of it. Who's the National Governors Association? They're a DC-based nonprofit group funded by federal grants, state taxpayers, and private groups like the Gates Foundation. They say that all the governors are members. Interestingly, all the governors do not pay dues. Some of them have said, I don't want to be a member, and I'm not paying dues. But they've said, well, we consider everybody's a member. So you need to understand, pull back the curtain and know who people are. I mean, everybody's got a nice sounding name, but pull back the curtain and know who people are when you investigate something. At the time, benchmarking for success was rolled out. Janet Napolitano was president of the NGA. The Council of Chief State School Officers. They're also a DC-based trade group. They're nonpartisan, nationwide, nonprofit, and they exist to facilitate state action to transform public education in 4 areas: educator workforce, information systems, next generation learners, standards, assessment, and accountability. They're funded by some business partners like Pearson, Microsoft, McGraw-Hill, Apple, Intel. Achieve, DC-based organization hired by the Common Core Standards Initiative to develop those math and English language arts standards, and their board consists of 4 governors and 3 gentlemen from private business. Some of their financial backers are AT&T, Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation, Microsoft, GE, some others. Pearson Publishing. They are based in the United Kingdom. They're a global company, but 60% of their sales is in North America. They deal in educational materials, technology, assessment, services to teachers and students, and some of their publishing labels you see there, Scott Forsman and Prentice Hall, names that you recognize if you look at textbooks. Pearson has been under a little scrutiny in the last couple of years. New York and Texas have looked into them. concerned with monopolistic dealings in public education there. In Illinois, there's an investigation, I don't know the current status of it, wherein they may have paid off some folks in education who were awarding contracts, and they didn't happen to be the low bidder apparently, but they had hosted these people at some junkets, so it didn't look really good for Pearson, so they've been under scrutiny. But the thing about it is, you keep hearing the Pearson name come up, and you will hear that name a lot. And the concern is that any single entity should hold that much power over standards, because they put money in the development of the standards. They're the dominant market player in curriculum and education materials. They're a player in the Park Assessment Consortium. All these things used in the classroom. So they're going to affect all these areas of classroom education. They got a $3 million grant from Bill and Melinda Gates to increase their role in resource development. The Fordham Institute estimates that it could cost states upwards of $8 billion for materials to implement Common Core standards. That is a huge market for companies like Pearson. PARC is the Partnership for Assessment of Readiness for College and Careers. It's one of two testing consortia funded by the Gates Foundation and Race to the Top grants. It exists to build a common set of math and English language arts assessments for K through 12 that line up to the Common Core standards. And I understand the assessments are supposed to roll out in 2013-2014 school year. Has it been pushed back? It's 15-16 now? Okay. The Foundation for Excellence was founded by Jeb Bush. Some of his big donors are Microsoft, GE, Intel. The Gates Foundation, he got $500,000 to promote Common Core from the Gates Foundation. In March of this year, he attended a private meeting with Bill and Melinda and Warren Buffett and Oprah, who is a big Common Core supporter, and Michael Bloomberg on Kiowa Island. I've never been there. It's off the coast of South Carolina, I think. Anyway, I'd like to have been a fly on the wall. I don't know. I just don't move with power brokers. In Bloom was created to build systems to track and analyze data collected by school districts. They got a $100 million grant from Bill and Melinda Gates and the Carnegie Foundation to fund In Bloom. I don't think Mississippi's not part of that, but just so you know, what they will do is collect data on students. They will build this big system to collect data about students, educational and personal data. They will manage, they will analyze, and they will give back to the districts who participate in Bloom these reports and analysis on this data. It's strange how it works. I'm not going to camp out there though. It's interesting to know that Amplify and Wireless Generation, these companies are in educational technology, and they're owned by Rupert Murdoch, who owns News Corp, who owns Fox News, and they're involved in the In-Bloom process. They're working with In-Bloom on their technology. So there's some other folks who have a huge investment in Common Core and what happens, but they've not been that involved so far. Not nearly as involved as all these other deep pockets and power brokers. And that is you, the parents, the students, the teachers, the campus administrators, central office administrators, school boards, city councils, state representatives definitely not that involved, and community leaders not involved. The Benchmarking for Success project was co-chaired by Janet Napolitano and Governor Sonny Perdue of Georgia, and the Intel chairman, and some other committee members from Microsoft, Fordham, Hunt, and the National Council of La Raza, plus some others. The Gates Foundation and GE generously supported that project. Some of the vision goals for Benchmarking for Success was to upgrade the state standards by adopting a common core of internationally benchmarked standards in math and English language arts. Leverage the state's collective influence to ensure that textbook, curricula, and assessments are aligned. revise state policies for recruiting and preparing, developing, supporting teachers and school leaders, hold schools and systems accountable, and measure state-level performance globally. What's the problem with the standards? What is the concern? Well, one concern is that states are required to adopt them 100%, word for word. Dr. Sandra Stotsky, who's a former Associate Commissioner at the Massachusetts Department of Education, she's a Professor Emerita at the University of Arkansas now, was on the Validation Committee for English Language Arts Standards. She would not sign off on the standards. She was not the only one on that committee who would not, but she's been more vocal about this subsequently. She described them as having empty skill sets, said they could not strengthen high school curriculum, and they could not reduce post-secondary remedial coursework in any legitimate way. You know, what does that mean? You know, it's a shame that anybody goes to college and has to take remedial coursework in English language arts. But if we're going to change standards and we're going to have a big revolution in education, can we at least not do something that's going to affect that? But she says, in her opinion, it would not. Dr. James Milgram, Professor Emeritus at Stanford, he was on the validation committee for the math standards. He's the only mathematician that was on that committee. And he's the only one who had any experience in standards validation. His opinion was that by the 5th grade, children would be more than a year behind in math, and 2 or more years behind by the 8th grade, and they would continue to decline. He did not like the geometry. It was not solid teaching in his opinion. Well, the Common Core state standards really are not state-led, and it's not been a transparent process. Teachers, administrators, and large groups of educational experts did not review them. The committee members were handpicked by special interest groups. They really were not representative of 45 adopting states. The comments that the validation committee people made, they have said, they have testified, we gave comments, but we have not seen how they were taken into account in the final standards document. They have asked how they were included, but they have not gotten any response satisfactorily. There were not any pilot programs for testing prior to the adoption or implementation. Most states adopted Common Core before they were written or approved. The Validation Committee repeatedly asked for proof of international benchmarking, but none was ever provided. Longitudinal data systems. Achieve says that states have to collect, coordinate, and use K through 12 and post-secondary data to track and improve the readiness of graduates to succeed in college and the workplace. This data is grade to grade, school to school, kindergarten into the workplace. The systems will manage, analyze, and use educational data, including student records, to help states, district school educators, and other stakeholders make informed decisions. The concern there is that those other stakeholders are not just across states, but across federal departments like HHS and labor and others, and with private entities. So a large sharing of student data, some of which is considered to be personal. Department of Education did get a $7.6 million grant for RLDS in Mississippi, and those are, that points out what they used the money for to create the database that would link all educational and workforce data through a unique common identifier that does not permit an individual to be identified by users of the system. They would develop an online one-stop portal that will provide access to the relational database and make the system universally operable, and develop the hardware and software for building and hosting that database. The stimulus bill provisions encourage states to develop data systems and collect copious information on public school systems. A condition of qualifying for the grant money came from the stimulus bill. All 50 states maintain and are capable of maintaining these databases according to the provisions of the stimulus bill. The Department of Education proposed some regulations in 2010 that would allow it to share data with other agencies and private companies. What kind of data? Traditional data that you might expect in an educational database, but also data about hobbies, your religious affiliations, medical conditions, learning disabilities, behavioral problems, family income, even sexual preferences, all kinds of things. The Federal Education Rights and Privacy Act says student information can't be released without the written prior consent from a parent or legal guardian. But in 2011, the federal government proposed a change, an exception that would permit disclosure without consent. This would be disclosure to school officials with legitimate educational interests. And it goes on to list who all those might be, and it's certainly open to some wide interpretation. Are we losing control? As parents, as citizens in the local community and local school boards, yeah, I think we need to be concerned that we're losing control. It doesn't sound to me like we have control over by local school districts. And it doesn't sound like we control curriculum. Now, we know the federal government's not supposed to dictate curriculum. You know, what is so troublesome about this to me? And I'm a student of the written word, and I can see how people wordsmith their language to make it say what they want it to say, but it's not exactly a lie, but it really is threatening. It really is not really good. It really concerns me. No, they're not controlling curriculum, but they're creating an environment where private enterprise is doing it for them. Because they're requiring the standards and they're requiring the assessments. And then the curriculum gets squeezed in the middle. And these stakeholders who are in the business of curriculum are accommodating that. And we're standing by as local school districts and taking it. These standards are owned and copyrighted by the National Governors Association and CSSSO. They define what students must be able to know and do across all states, whatever grade level you're at, whatever point in time. States who adopt them have to adopt all of them. You can't change anything, you can't delete anything. You can add up to 15% of content, but students will likely not be tested on that, of course. In case of a problem, if you as a parent have a concern about those standards and what's going on, who's accountable for that? And who's going to advocate for your children? Well, the standards are owned by these private groups in Washington. And they're not accountable to parents and teachers. What does it cost to implement this? The Pioneer Institute did the first and may still be the only estimate of what it would cost to implement all these Race to the Top and Common Core programs in year one plus the years 2 through 7, and they estimated $15.8 billion spread across all the states who participate after Race to the Top funds. So there'll be costs with textbooks and equipment and lots of technology, training teachers and administrators, data coaches, databases, implementation, maintenance, tracking. There'll be costs to teachers. I live in Clinton, one of the best school districts in the state, and we're very proud of that. But I talked to my friend who retired last year. She said, I've had enough. High school English teacher. She said, I've had enough. I'm being told what to teach, how to teach it, when to teach it. I'm gifted. I'm called to do this. And I personally believe teaching is a calling. I mean, you can be educated all you want to. But if you're going to be a good teacher, you're going to be called to do it, and you're going to have a love for it. And she did. But she said, I just can't do this anymore. And she said, I have friends in the school system who are just they're just trying to make it to retirement. They're just trying to make it. And that's a sad thing, that our cost is in our veteran teachers who feel that way. And of course, we've lost local control. That's very clear. Just as a point that you need to bear in mind, Obama's got the new Preschool for All program that focuses on 3 to 5 year olds It calls for longitudinal data systems for daycares and preschool programs. It will have Race to the Top grants. It will be in partnership with the HHS, which is stressing the importance of home visits. And it will have common standards, and he's suggesting that to continue to fund it after Race to the Top, there could be some sales tax hikes. Who gains from Common Core state standards? Bill and Melinda Gates, Jeb Bush. You know, there's a lot about politics that I don't follow and I don't try to follow. But the more I looked into this, and when I look at these big names, it always says to me, money, power, influence. And I'm not accusing anybody, not Jeb Bush or not anybody else, of not caring about children. I am not. I believe they care about education. But they are sincerely wrong in what they're pursuing. And I'm so afraid that their political issues and their funding of their next campaign and those kind of things, they cloud everything else. So I respect them. You know, I love them in the Lord, but they're just wrong. Anyway, that's my looks for a minute. So who's on the losing end? Well, the taxpayers are victimized again because we're paying a lot of money for this. Local districts and communities are. We don't have control over what's going on. Teachers and administrators, I just don't believe that in the local school districts that our teachers were consulted until they were told, here it is, and here's how we're going to do it. Now, you know, if I'm wrong, I'll tell you I'm wrong, but I haven't found one yet that was ever involved and ever consulted. You need to understand, at the national level, there were 4 or 5 people who were the chief architects of Common Core standards. They drove the train, and not one of them had ever taught in the K-12 classroom, ever. What else is there? Well, what I just said, those chief architects didn't have any K-12 experience. If you're looking for a Bill Ayers connection for all of the conspiracy theorists out there, you can find him. You can find him. Agenda 21, you all are probably familiar with that if you've been active in the Tea Party any length of time. Yep, there's a connection there. The global education agenda. 45 states originally adopted. Texas, Alaska, Virginia, Nebraska, Wisconsin are not in it. 16 states are in various stages of rejecting Common Core. They've either done some legislation, they have some pending, they pulled out of the testing consortium, they're doing something. What should Mississippi do? Well, I think Mississippi should take a cue from the state of Indiana and just say, time out, let's stop. You know, we really didn't do a thorough review. We need to halt this and conduct a review and a fiscal assessment. The legislature needs to get involved, and we need to have some hearings. We need to withdraw from that testing consortium. And I think we need to repeal that SLDS legislation. That's me. But what do citizens need to do? What do you and I need to do? Well, we need to keep educating ourselves. And we need to pay attention to what's going on in our children's classroom. I had a friend who told me at church yesterday, my daughter-in-law said, my grandson came home with a book from his art class that was stamped Common Core in art. And I said, I don't know, but I'll go look at it one day and we'll see what's going on. Anyway, talk to your legislators. I can't tell you how important that is. They're just, we've got a wonderful group in the Senate who is really carrying the water on this issue, and I appreciate that. But there's a bunch more up there in the legislature that really need to hear from their citizens, their constituents. You need to attend state and local school board meetings, and I'm afraid as citizens, for generations, we've been negligent in our responsibility as citizens. We don't go to the city council meetings. We don't go to the Board of Education meetings. We don't go down the Capitol. It's our government, folks. If it's not working, it's our fault. You could opt out of Common Core, I guess. There's a website called Truth in American Education. most websites you can click on About Us and it'll say, you know, here's who's done that website, but you don't it that way. If you've ever looked for it, you don't it that way. Well, there are 5 people who put it together. I know the names of 3 of them, and I've talked to 2 of them on the phone personally. And they are people of very high credibility and high positions of responsibility. And I say that because it is on their website, Truth in American Education, that you can find a form that says opt out. I made a few copies, you may have picked one up, but it simply says, and you deliver it to your local school district, I do not want my child doing this, this, and this in Common Core. I'd be interested to know how it's handled and what happens. Here's the bottom line, and I think it was well said by these folks. Governor Bob McDonald said, and he didn't take it. He said, we don't need the federal government Common Core to make our own schools in Virginia. We've got our own system. It's very good, and it's empirically tested. And I love Rick Perry. Don't mess with Texas. The academic standards of Texas are not for sale. Lindsey Burke with the Heritage Foundation said, it's time once again to stand up for academic freedom and reject this latest and perhaps greatest overreach. I said at the beginning there are probably some good things to be learned from Common Core standards. You know, there's not really anything wrong with working with other states to develop uniform standards or working with other states to develop testing or those kinds of things. There's a great benefit in it. But there is something very problematic to have it being driven down by the federal government and from people who have really deep pockets and their own personal philosophical agenda about what social reforms we need in America that may not necessarily line up with ours. But their money has been filtered down into Mississippi to change schools in Mississippi. I'm just here to say we've been asleep at the wheel in Mississippi. Our educational system is good in many, many ways. And as I said, I'm very proud of the Clinton School District. They do a really good job. I've talked with the administrators there, and they've shown me how they're implementing it, and they're doing the best they can with it. And I respect that for them. But fundamentally, it's flawed. There's a lady in New York who writes an education blog, and she's very intelligent and very schooled. She's pretty liberal for me, but amazingly, I found I agreed with her on this. Because she said she has a problem with the fact that standards have never been tested. Even if they work out, I don't know how they work out, but I have to oppose Common Core just based alone on the way in which it was foisted upon schools across the country. So with that, I agree with her. Everything else she's pretty liberal on. I don't know if I can answer your questions. I'll certainly try. I don't know everything there is to know. But Angela Hill's here, who's been a teacher, and she has researched this immensely in some areas that I really haven't delved into. So maybe between the 2 of us, we might can help you understand a little bit better if I've succeeded in confusing you.
I'm going to let Angela come up. Angela, you want to go ahead and anything else you want to introduce her?
Sure.
Anything else you can add to what she said before we let Melanie and Becky come up and we'll do the question now?
I appreciate the Tea Party and Brookhaven folks for inviting me over here. Appreciate the work that Rita Anderson has done researching this. Very, very much. The time in Mississippi to go along to get along is over.
Amen.
We have some serious concerns with this.
Tell them how far you drove to come.
Oh, I drove 2.5 hours to get here. Yeah, I did. I drove 2.5 hours to get here. Like Rita said, I'm a teacher, former teacher, put 2 children through the public school system. I'm a product of Picayune Public School Systems, and I'm very proud of the education that I got there, and I want that trend to continue. And that's part of my concern with this whole ball game, not just how it was hatched, but looking into the standards and looking at some of the changes in the standards that we have is concerning to me. I was a science education major and certified in chemistry and biology, and I have some very serious concerns with what the math is doing with Common Core, besides the philosophical overreach, the coercion from the federal government to get us on board, and you know, it's never too late to do the right thing. And there's been a few people that have told me the snowballs roll too far down the hill, but I'm not that kind of gal. You know, as long as that snowball hadn't hit the bottom of that hill, we can still take a breath and say, let's reevaluate where we are in the state of Mississippi with this. And I think that we deserve, as citizens, an opportunity to reevaluate this because we never had the chance in the beginning. It was done through an executive decision, and there were very little everyday people had any type of input or knowledge, and the legislature, to what I can find, was not even involved in the decision, or even still, many of them don't know anything about what Common Core standards are. And, you know, I'm doing my best to look into what we can do as Mississippians to be better than this, because I believe Mississippi can be better than Common Core standards. I absolutely do. I believe in the people in the state of Mississippi. I live within 15 minutes of Stennis Space Center. We have tremendous folks, local folks working in the areas of engineering, science and technology, oceanography. Those are people who were born and raised and educated in Mississippi. And I think that we need to just take a step back and look and reevaluate and see where do we go from here, and see what we can do as far as getting the independence back in Mississippi in control of our standards. And we can do that. You see these other states that were mentioned that stood on their own 2 feet and said, you know, we're not for sale, we're going to control our education. Education is a state issue, okay? It is not a federal government issue. And we will do everything in our power as conservatives, as folks who are accountable to the taxpayer, to make sure that this returns to become a state issue and is not driven and led by special interests in the heavy hand of the federal government. Because, folks, we're teetering on the borderline of not having very many freedoms at all left. And we are at the point to where we're going to have to stop and say, look, we're the new patriots, and we are looking into what's being, you know, foisted upon us without adequate debate and without any type of real empirical data that says this is going to do anything. I mean, I got a report right here from the Brookings Institute that says if common standards were going to raise achievement, it would have already done it in the state of Mississippi and all the rest of the states that have had common standards since 2003. Okay? If you look at Mississippi and compare it to Massachusetts, okay, our best schools in the state of Mississippi can compare with the best schools in other states. It is the discrepancy within our schools across our state that is the problem. And if a common set of standards was going to close that gap, it would have done it by now. So, you know, I don't see any scientific evidence, or I don't see anything that makes me believe that this is going to do anything different than any other common set of standards or any of these new approaches to teaching math that have been tried through the years and have never materialized. There's nothing to prove to me, and I'm a proof type of person, that this is going to work, and I'm just not willing to take that risk. So I appreciate you letting me be here. Hand this back to Rita.
No, leave. You might have to. Anybody got a question? John?
I guess to qualify myself, I am part of the Central Mississippi Tea Party and attended several events down here in Brookheaven. I'm from the old school of boiling it down. I'm an old country boy. You've done a great job. This is just like Obamacare. It's about control of not only of your health care, but of our kids when they come home. You're going to get to a point when they come home with math problems, you're not going to be able to do them with them anymore. It's difficult enough as it is. They're going to come home with this new stuff. You're not going to know how to teach it. Government comes in, your kid ain't making the grades. They come into your house. What's the problem here at home? Why isn't your kid learning? What's the problem here at home? What's the problem with most Mississippi homes? How many parents we got in these homes? So you're talking about inner city schools, you got one parent. I've been down there. I've helped rebuild the schools. I've painted the schools. We've redone the schools. and they still can't learn in that environment because you got stupid people teaching kids that don't have a home. I've been down there when they can't even read and write. The teachers in the inner city schools. That's what they're going to. So we got to go to our legislature. I've been to Greg Harper's office this morning. They have a daggum town hall. He's running all over damn Mississippi and he can't even meet with a damn Tea Party. I've had enough of this government taking control of our lives and people not standing up. You got to stand up for your state.
That's right, that's right, that's right, that's right. I will tell you, in the 7 months, I read stuff till I'm blue in the face, and I'm always really careful, you know, to be on authoritative news sites. And I follow the speeches of these architects, these main architects who've never been in a K-12 classroom. By the way, I was amused by a quote from a man who was the teacher of the year in California in 2007. Who, of course, objects to the Common Core. It's like thinking you're going to learn how to cook from somebody who's never been in the kitchen. And that's exactly right. But I follow their speeches and their comments, and they unabashedly use the term social reform in connection with Common Core. I've seen it time and time and time again. I'm thinking they're not making any secrets about it. But I'll tell you, the values and the character and the culture and the integrity and the honor and the justice, I want that my children to learn that from me. Now, here's one of the problems. I didn't get into this. That the English language arts standards are requiring a large percentage of informational text. But informational text could be anything from the Gettysburg Address to how to install your computer or the R factor of insulation or whatever like that. And those are fine things to know, but I don't think it's going to turn our school students in to people who love to read. You read because what you're reading tells the story of real lives. It's human drama, it's relationships, it's love, it's mercy, it's justice, it's honor, and those are the things that really drive you to want to read. I'm having a lot of trouble with that part of English language.
Let's wait before we do any more questions. So let Melanie come up. Go ahead and introduce Melanie Sojourner, Senator, glad she's with us tonight.
Thank you, Rita, so much, and thank you, Angela. I am Melanie Sojourner. I'm a state senator that represents Adams, Emmett, Franklin, and Pike, and it's an honor to be with you tonight. And real quick, I want to hit on just a couple of things because then I want to bring all these ladies back up and answer some questions. Because we do have a wealth of knowledge in these ladies, and I cannot be more impressed with what I have learned on this topic from Senator Hill as someone who has spent her life in the classroom and has taken the effort to go a step further and really research this. I wanted to let you know just a little bit about where our concern came from. Angela and I were both elected this past term, and we came in a very large freshman class that really wants to kind of dig a little deeper and take some things a step further. And I'll tell you, when we first got there, I had no idea that first year there would be almost 3,000 bills introduced. And guys, I'm going to tell you, 3,000 bills were introduced, okay? We didn't take up that many. We took up a little less than 1,000 that first year. How many of those do you think I had a chance to personally read? Some of them I didn't see until 10 seconds before we took them up in committee. So as this began to go on and we began to realize how quickly things could fall through the gap that could impact your life tremendously, I realized there were some others in the Senate that felt the same way I did. And we were having meetings once a week. So basically what happened, we started out with 3 or 4 of us and it grew into a group of 11. And here's what we realized was that philosophically, the 11 of us had some very different opinions than some of the others in the chamber, despite the fact that we may be within the same party, despite the fact that we all represent a state that's very much similar across it. We just had some core philosophical differences. So we formed the Mississippi Senate Conservative Coalition. This is not new to the state of Mississippi. Representative Curry is a member of the House Conservative Coalition. They've been in existence for a long time. They function very well together. They're a group that share common philosophies and principles, and they get together. And here's what we wanted to do. We wanted to get together and we wanted to read bills. We didn't want a bill coming to the floor that we didn't have a chance to read and understand. So we thought if there's a group of us, we can divide and conquer. That was kind of the concept, was to divide and conquer. We also knew that as we moved forward, the only way we were going to implement good legislation was if it was researched, vetted, debated, if we talked about it in our local communities, and we brought it forth. So that was the second phase. One, we wanted to read bills, and two, we wanted to put in as much homework as possible to develop good legislation before we sent it back down. And as taxpayers, everyone had to live with it. So we did that. Right at the end of session, we formed and announced, and one of the first things that came to our attention was some stuff with Common Core. You know, I'll tell you, amongst the 11 of us, I'm pretty proud of the fact we've got a pastor, a teacher, a county agent, a home builder, a farmer, a couple of attorneys, a doctor. We're a really diversified group of everyday people from all over Mississippi. I had a friend of mine two friends, both educated in the state of Mississippi. One's a current teacher in Oklahoma, one's a current teacher in Florida. Called me back early in session. Said, if you guys aren't paying attention to something called Common Core, you better start. Because it's wreaking havoc with us and some things in Oklahoma and in Florida. Senator Hill and a couple other of us began to do some research. So Common Core was one of the first things that we knew we wanted to tackle. Some of you may be familiar, we came right out of the gate going up against Medicaid. There's a couple of us that are writing right now a Medicaid reform bill for the state of Mississippi. Common Core came along, we immediately realized this was something we needed to dig into. As some of you may have seen, we've come out against the gas tax and a few other things that we're going to fight on your behalf. I say all this just because I want you to kind of know where our concern from Common Core came from. We've spent a lot of time researching. Are we the experts? No. I'll yield to Senator Hill all day long on this issue because you know what? She's been in the classroom. I have not. So, but I just want you to know a little bit about where it came from and kind of where we're going from here. Kendall, I'll turn it over to Representative Curry and let her go next, and then the four of us can kind of take some questions from you after we get done.
Thank you, Senator.
I'm Representative Becky Curry from right here in Brookhaven, and I'm a nurse, so we are a little diversified group. And am I an expert? Absolutely not. I will tell you that I've spent most of my time looking at Obamacare, and you're absolutely correct. If you don't think that they don't want your information, go to the doctor's office and then have all your information sent to the IRS, which is where your health records are going. So we're all paying attention to some different things, but this is something that has touched all of us. I've been here a little bit longer than these two ladies, but I am glad to finally get some help. Thank you. I'm going to be up front. When I first came into the legislature in 2008, if you asked questions or you didn't agree, and especially in education or healthcare, well, you were against the children, or you were against the sick people. And I can't tell you how many times I was told that, and I kept thinking, absolutely not. That's not what's going on here. I'm for them. I want them to get better and have better, and we're paying plenty of money, and they deserve it. But all we got was, you're against teachers. I'm not against teachers, and there's some here, and I'm not going to point them out tonight. They know who they are because they talked to me and said they were too scared to come. I'm proud to see them here. Like I said, I won't point them out. If you're too scared to come to a meeting because you're going to lose your job because you want to be a good teacher, some heads need to roll, I can tell you that. But they're here, and I'm proud of them. In 2010, I believe this SLD something or another that I saw on there showed you how much, there's a lot of things if you look back, and I'm proud to say that I have not found it to happen, but I will be the bearer of some bad news. And I did talk to Greg Harper about this. He said the same thing happens in Washington. You can take a bill that you passed on, and it takes a long time to get a bill out. It's House, Senate, back to the Senate, back to the House, then the governor signs it. If you keep a copy of it and then read it later, you may find a paragraph that suddenly appeared out of nowhere. And never was any of this ever discussed in the legislature, never in education meetings, and here we are with it. Now, Mississippi tried hard to get that big money. We implemented a lot of things, but we didn't get it because we're a red state. And you need to understand, we have already invested a lot of our tax dollars in this. So Senator Hill is right. We need to step back Let's look and see where we are. Now, there's a lot of people in here that know we have some good schools and we have some bad schools, and that's the way it is in this state. And I wish there was the magic button or the magic medicine or whatever it is to make them all good, because, you know, when you're in the 9th grade or the 10th grade, you can't wait. We can't wait to figure out how to fix this for them. Go talk to Ronnie Nettles up here at Colin Junior College. He's teaching kids how to read and do basic math. And I mean, that's just ridiculous. We've got to do something. All I really want to tell you is thank you, because you care and you're here. And the one thing I promise you about government, they do want your vote and they will listen to you. But if you don't let us know, if we don't hear from you, we think, well, we didn't hear from him, everything's okay. But guess what? We will listen, email, call, do whatever. We need to be hearing from people, and you will be surprised how many people have no idea what's going on with health care and Common Core and the day. I mean, look, I go to work every day. I've been to work all day myself. I actually showed up last week and called Kendall and asked them where they were. Yeah, I have a busy schedule too. I came the wrong day, but I came twice. I'm here tonight too. But I just want you to know, you do have people up there that care, and you do have people up there that are working hard, and we are going to find out what's going on and figure this out. A lot of our state agencies, if you think it's just education, you're real wrong. I'm fighting with the Department of Medicaid. Angela and I are fighting with the Department of Wildlife and Forestry. Every one of them has this mess of some kind going on. But tonight we're talking about our children and their education. And you have 3 women that are willing to be. You can drag us down the street and tell us that we don't like the children. It's okay. And guess what? We can take it. We can take it. Because we know we're doing what's right for the state of Mississippi. And thank y'all, and I'll turn this back over to whoever needs to go next.
Now, gentlemen, come up here, many of them wanted to speak. All these speakers, let me throw this out here nowhere, but the area will be open here. All these speakers were lined up ahead of time. Now, I know we got some people here got some different feelings about Common Core than I do, and that's fine. But you're gonna need to conduct yourself in a professional way, or we're gonna ask you to leave. And we will help you leave if need be. So, I want to make sure you understand, we'll let you ask me questions. You can ask you questions, you know, but as far as coming up here and speak when I don't know nothing about you, you know, I just don't do that. Somebody else may do that.
That's not open discourse,
Well,
sir.
that's the way it's gonna be.
The Tea Party's the one that
I
showed
don't
us
know
how to
nothing
do that.
about you, and we're gonna open up for questions now. He didn't even want to tell me who he
Oh,
was,
I'll
where
be
he was
glad to
from.
tell you who I am, but you're advocating exactly what you're against. The Tea Party was formed because the formal system wouldn't let you guys speak. And now that you've got the control, you're playing the same game.
We ain't got no control.
What?
He's
He's controlling me.
Well, I don't want to get off
I don't
on,
want to ask
well,
the
this
question.
ain't about the
Okay,
Tea Party.
I
If you got a
appreciate that.
question you want to ask,
I would be
we'll let you ask.
professional. But I'd like to make a statement more than a question.
Well.
Would you allow that? I don't need the microphone. I'll tell you who I am.
I'm
I'll be glad to.
before we open this up.
It won't be
you
offensive,
need-
sir.
We're gonna lay out the ground rules here.
Okay? You tell me to
We're
stop,
gonna
I'll
keep it,
stop.
we're gonna keep it a question and answer. That's what we're gonna keep. That's what we said we was gonna do from the beginning. Okay? You know, if you wanted to, afterwards, over discuss this, you got something you wanna say, that'd be fine.
That's fine, sir.
But I said that, I wouldn't have said, I wanna clear it up, that you're not being treated no more than anybody else. We ain't let nobody else come through. Angela I told you she was a senator.
That's very controlling.
Well, there's gotta be some way we're gonna do things. So, with that, the restroom is right here. If anybody needs to go to the restroom, some people are asking about the restroom. And, we got some brochures back there for y'all to take. Somebody has to leave before we get through. I'm trying to remember anything else. We are recording this. People that couldn't be here wanting to see it, so it is recorded. If you don't want your question to be on video, then don't ask it, okay? Because it's gonna be on video. And the response will be too, okay? Ms. Jennings?
I have a question.
Okay.
To get started. we're talking about public school, but it's my understanding that Common Core is also going to affect private schools and homeschoolers. So
That's a good point.
this is affecting education from one end to the
I've
other.
heard that too, homeschoolers too eventually.
Right.
Especially when they get to college, they gotta get the Common Core
I want to make
curriculum.
sure, is that right, Rita? Am I understanding that correct?
You heard that from the same source that I did.
Okay.
The Freedom Works.
Well, that's a good question. Somebody that know about that can answer that question. All right, well, we will, Timothy, you got a question? We fix to get started. Is that what?
I have an answer to the previous question.
Oh, you got an answer?
The answer is yes, it definitely affects homeschools. The HSLDA, which is the Homeschool Legal Defense Association, says that basically homeschoolers are going to have to implement Common Core standards for them if they're going to want to go to college.
I couldn't hear you good, but y'all hear that? Y'all agree with that? All right, we'll go ahead and, now, try not to ask three questions in one question. I've been to a place where we do this. People ask 3 or 4 questions in one question, and the person answering forgot the second question, okay? So let's just try to be, we won't treat everybody with respect, as long as you treat the speaker with respect, okay? So who wants to, Ms. Rita, you can, you let Angela answer, or Melanie, or Becky, whoever wants to go. If anybody's got a question, just ask Rita. Or Angela.
We'll let the teacher answer that question about the homeschools and the private schools and programs.
Basically, when David Coleman, who was one of the primary architects of Common Core, was put in the position of chairman of the National College Board, the first thing he did with this so-called state-led initiative that Common Core was only going to affect the people who chose to join in, is he announced that the National College Board was having the ACT and the SAT rewritten to align with Common Core. So even though the 5 states who did not join Common Core and the parochial and private and homeschoolers who hoped that they would not be affected by these voluntary state-led standards are immediately being affected, because if you want to go to a college or university in this country, guess what? You have to take the ACT and the SAT, one or the other, depending on where you go. So the immediate alignment of the ACT and the SAT to Common Core standards was another federal intrusion into those folks who chose not to participate in Common Core and those folks who are in private, parochial, homeschool, other forms of education besides public. So it is a very, very far-reaching tool that has been used to try to get everyone on board with Common Core, because the folks that run their private schools or the folks at homeschool certainly want their kids to do well on a college level entrance exam. And I see some folks texting in the audience, and I'm glad they're texting this, because I want everybody to know that this is how this has been handled. And so we have a problem right here with the 5 states that did not join in, but yet their students are still going to be subjected to the SAT and SAT that has been aligned to Common Core. Now, when have we ever needed the ACT or the SAT to be aligned to a certain way of thinking or doing? You know, that's the freedom of education and teaching in this country. So yes, to answer that question, it absolutely will affect everybody. But I think Rick Perry has the attitude, oh well, Texas is still going to do okay. So, you know, I applaud him for that.
Question.
Yes. Yes.
Is ACT a intelligence test?
ACT is a test on English, language, science, and social studies.
No, I mean, is it a measure of a child's intelligence?
It's generally not that type of test. It's generally a measure of what they've been taught.
May I tell you what the ACT test is?
Does it have anything to do with Common Core?
Well, it does.
Well, how is it?
It does, because ACT is being promoted now to be, and eventually, if all of this comes to pass, ACT will be the test that decides whether a kid goes to college or not. There's a move for that now.
Well, there's a move in some of the schools that have piloted Common Core to use ACT strictly for their high school benchmark. I do know that.
May I?
I'm gonna let her answer.
Yeah, okay, sure.
Yes.
Do you want it, Rick?
I'll be respectful. I'm not going to be disrespectful.
Let him speak.
Well, where does Mississippi rank?
Who are you and what do you do?
Does that matter? But
Yeah, I think it does matter. If I was going to get to, let me just say this. If I was going to speak at a public school board meeting, I would not be allowed to speak unless I was put on the agenda probably 2 or 3 weeks ahead of time,
Yeah.
and I would have to tell what I was going to speak about. So, and I will,
I'm just wondering why you don't want to.
Oh, I'll be glad to tell you, sir. I'm just waiting for the right time to do it, make sure people
Let's
can
see it
hear.
right now.
yeah, who are you,
May I
sir?
stand?
Yeah, go ahead.
Good. Hi, my name's John Jordan. I've spent 35 years in public education in the state of Mississippi, probably since 1975. I've probably educated your children in Natchez. Sorry, it's not a good thing.
No, I appreciate you spending 35 years in public education. That's a huge accomplishment to be able to
Now,
spend that.
okay, that's really not important, and I've done it all. I served in the Department of Education. I was a superintendent of schools in Oxford, 3 times better school district than most in the state of Mississippi. I worked for Jackson Public Schools for 8 years. I taught school in the Mississippi Delta. I was the principal of Cathedral School in Natchez, Mississippi, for 4 years, back in the 80s. What do you do now? I'm retired.
Do you do any consulting for anybody?
No, I don't. Yes, I do some consulting for myself, and a lot of it's pro bono, just for the matter.
That's kind of how I do it too, because
Yes.
we don't have any researchers in the Senate for
That's
us.
right, but I'm not a researcher, I'm an educator. And the question is, where does Mississippi rank among the 50 states in the education of its children?
We thank God for Washington, D.C.
Yeah, there you go.
That's all the problem.
Well, I think the last report that
49, 50.
I looked at was 48 or
Okay,
49.
Okay, good.
But
Where does the United States of America stand in the education of its children with all other developed nations?
17th in the world.
17th in the world. 17 people are beating us, right?
That's right.
Okay, good. That's not good. is it?
How many patents do we
All right.
have every year?
I know, I understand. My only point is that every time an education reform comes down the pipe,
it never works.
well, it may not, but you know what? That's the whole Common Core standards. The word standard is being written as if it's something that is going to control every aspect of us as human beings, and it's not. Well, it could, sir. It could in a country. It could in a country
Look where the money's coming from, sir. It's all liberal, left-wing nuts.
No, not necessarily.
Oh, come on.
Haley Barber.
Be truthful.
Haley Barber signed off on this.
Where were we ranked in 1970? Do you
Well,
know?
sir, that was
Where were we ranked in
sir.
1970?
That was before we implemented the largest.
Okay. Do you have another question?
No.
Okay, thank you.
That's not relevant. to
We
this.
were number 1 in the world.
Yeah, well,
Let's
that's
get back on course.
for half of us.
Yes,
Yes, ma'am, go ahead.
I have a question.
yes.
You mentioned in your introduction that you were very much opposed to.
Could you tell me who you are?
I'm Susan McGee. I too have worked in public education for many, many years. Done all kinds of things. Helped, taught, school principal, central office, administration, done it all. Counselor, high school teacher. I'm being fair. I'm the curriculum coordinator, South Pike School District. Yes.
Yes, what's your question?
Okay, my question. You mentioned earlier that you were opposed to certain math standards.
No, I didn't say I was opposed, I said I was concerned about certain things being removed and changed.
Okay. Those certain things being removed and changed.
Yes.
Could you please expound on those certain things that are of concern to you?
Well, one of my primary concerns is the Algebra 1 being moved back to 9th grade when we have 30% of our students who now take it in 8th.
No, Algebra 1 is, that is incorrect.
Common Core template says that Algebra 1 is moved back to 9th grade.
No, it doesn't.
Just
No.
another example.
No, that's,
Well, you know, I thought you people could be decent. You called me ignorant just now?
Yes,
Did
he did.
everybody hear that?
Yes, he
This man
did.
called me
Yes, he
ignorant.
did.
He did, I heard it. I was the one asking the question, but in reference to that, the Common Core standards for mathematics, what was taught in the 5th grade in math will now be taught in the 3rd grade. 2nd grade. Algebra is being taught to 7th and 8th grade students now. we won't even be teaching.
Our students in my school district are not taking pre-algebra anymore in 7th grade. They're taking Common Core math, and the parents have been told
And you know what?
that they're not taking algebra until 9th grade, even though they're ready.
No.
It is true.
No longer will algebra be offered as an isolated subject. Algebra is being introduced.
I understand the math is turned into genres in the high
By the time they
school.
get into high school, there's an integration of math. It's called integrated math, 1, 2, 3.
Yes, I read the
4.
standards. I read all of them.
At that time, all mathematics, including calculus, trigonometry, geometry, algebra, advanced algebra, all of that is integrated in these maths, starting at math 1 in the 9th grade. So you won't have algebra taught to 9th grade students because they will already have had integrated math in the 5th and in the 6th grade.
Has that been, I mean, has the integrated math been proven?
No.
I mean, that's.
Ma'am, you don't teach math skills in isolation. That only makes sense.
There's quite a few experts out there in the mathematics field, engineers, all kinds of folks in the science and mathematics fields that are very, very concerned
Let me
about the math program in Common Core. And the thing is, I think we need to reevaluate where we are. There's people who feel passionately about what they're doing, and that's perfectly fine and understandable. But to call somebody ignorant.
What are y'all rated? What is your grade? You already know your grade for this year. What's your grade for this year?
The grade for South Pike School
Yes,
District?
ma'am.
It is a D, as a matter of fact.
Did you make it to a D in South Point?
Yes.
Well, you know, just in case some of you think I am ignorant, I'm a product of the public school system of the state of Mississippi. I did graduate valedictorian in my class, 1 out of 237. I was the most outstanding undergraduate at USM in 1991 in science education. I had the highest score in the history of Program Community College on the American Chemical Society test that was given to all freshman college students across this nation.
Do you understand
So-
what the word ignorant means?
Do you get Webster's?
I think this is diverting from where.
I think so too. I agree with
All of
you.
us would agree that you.
I agree.
I have one question.
I agree.
I'm Johnny Johnson. I live here in Brookhaven. My children do not, and they're gone. But my question about the ACT, I want to get back to this
Yes.
ACT, is that if we have an education system with Common Core and with our private schools and things like that, what difference does it make? What kind of ACT score has? If it's going to be lower, those smarter students are going to make it to college anyway.
Well,
Is that protected?
it will affect it. You know, it will affect it because just like with the Common Core, we're taking MCT tests still, but we're on Common Core curriculum or Common Core standards. And all the states who have gone to Common Core standards but are still taking their state tests, like Maryland had a drop in their state test for the first time in 10 years. So it's not aligned to what you're doing. So if a test is aligned to a certain way of teaching and somebody's teaching in a different manner, that could affect those kids' scores. And it proves that with the fact that we've had state scores drop in Maryland and some of the other places that have been on Common Core standards but are taking their state test. And Mississippi is set up to continue on MCT2, I believe, until 15-16. One of the governor's advisors told me that the tests had been pushed back to 15-16. So that means we will teach Common Core alignment in Mississippi for the next 2 years, but we will still give our state MCT2 test. So we'll be given a test that's not aligned to the standards that are being taught for 2 years in Mississippi, and then they will roll it out in 15-16.
So our ACTs right now are higher standard, and that would be
We have no idea what the new ACT will look like.
Well, I'm just, you're saying that the Common Core in this other state has gone, the average ACT has gone down?
No, I didn't say anything about ACT. I said their state test went down while they have been teaching Common Core aligned standards. Their state test scores in Maryland and a couple other states went down.
Angela,
Yes.
this morning, while I was thinking that you talking about math, I was on Fox News, and they had a clip about how math was changed. One was in the report, some of y'all seen it.
Yeah,
Did you see that?
and I did see that. And
How can they think you have the wrong answer, wrong answer, still be right?
well, that's a concern about the test, and especially a computer adaptive test. There's just a tremendous amount that's not known about how the tests are going to play out, and that is definitely a concern about the process of getting the answer possibly being more accurate than the right answer. I don't know if I buy into that with math or not, so that's why there's a lot left to be seen and to play out with this. So, you know, piloting something would have been a much better approach than throwing everybody into the frying pan all at one time.
And this, I have a question, kind of a follow-up thing here too. I'm Jim McCullough from Platte County, and my qualifications were, my mother was a teacher for 50 years, so I kind of grew up with this stuff. She was so far back, she wrote the first Title I for the Oklahoma school system, so that's pretty far back there.
That's pretty invested.
But, well, you know, I watched and I've listened, and I'm primarily, my life has been in media, advertising, and why people do it here. But my question to you is, as you look at Common Core, do you find it, like I did, it's not necessarily so much about educational standards, but it is about gathering the information on the students?
That's a huge part of the movement. There's a lot of moving parts to it, and the data collection is a part of it, and that goes along with the testing through the consortium.
And the people who, you will, the schools will have subjects to teach, and they'll have the teaching material that's provided by one central company. And there will be one test that's administered nationwide.
Well, no, because now we've already had quite a few states that have dropped out of the two different consortia, so there's not going to be a common test across the country. That was the goal. That was the intent or goal, but that's not going to happen.
But my main problem with all of this is if you look at all of those companies and in our local, first, the Emory newspapers in Mississippi is so far out there, they want this so bad. And the deal is, you know, we've had to defend Melody's reputation or whatever 2 or 3 times because of this. But you know, the question they ask is, how can a senator know more than, you know, whoever it is in one of the big education things? And that's the old rules for radical solvency.
Yeah.
And they said this is backed by the Walton Foundation. The Walton Foundation is Walmart. You know, what people don't understand sitting in this room is this ain't about education. This is about marketing data.
Yes.
Why does Walmart want this information? So they can sell you some stuff.
Well, it's about a lot of things,
Yeah,
and it's about a lot of special interests, and I'm afraid that our kids are getting caught up in all this and kind of being the object of a bunch of people's interests in other things.
And the history of Common Core, I think, does it at 1876.
I haven't gone that far back.
It doesn't go all the way back.
Right quick before we start losing more people. And, you know, this is what I was trying to say to you guys. You're here tonight because we all care. And for one side to get mad and one side to act ugly and one side to call somebody names, if you don't think that we're not touching a nerve here tonight.
Amen.
Let me tell you something.
And I expected it. I hate it, but I expected
the
it.
problem when you have taxpayers that are just, we care. We want to know the facts. It may be the best thing since sliced bread, but for God's sake, let's find out. But we don't have to act like this, and that's what I'm trying to tell you. When I ask questions before, you must hate teachers. You hate teachers. I know you do. I don't hate teachers. And that kind of behavior is ridiculous, and we've got to stop it. But if it doesn't stop, we've got to take it over.
Is that the example that we have for our children in our schools? That's pretty sad. That's all I got to say.
And Jim's got a point. You know, I'm a state senator with a background in marketing and agriculture. So, I mean, you can figure out real quick what my limited knowledge is in a public education system. But I will tell you, I mean, just like Angela, just like Becky Kirk, we're listening to the people in our district, and I do. I've got teachers at Cathedral. I've got some that are terrified of what Common Core means, not so much because of some of the specific standards, but because of the federal intrusion and oversight. I've also got teachers who say, look, there are some good things in there, but the whole thing's not. And that's what we're saying, let's back up. Maybe there's some good things we can learn from this, maybe, but my big thing is, guys, nowhere in the Constitution does it say anything about a National Board of Education.
That's right.
And the thing that we've got to do is we've got to maintain some state control here.
Right.
So I don't want to just sit up here and just slam and badmouth and say this is the worst thing that's ever come along. And look, there are some tremendous educators in this state. But I'm just saying, why are we racing to the finish line to get this in place when we know what it's going to cost us on the testing side, because we know Mississippi's not prepared to get there? Let's just back up and catch our breath. And we can't do the job that you sent us to do if you're not talking to us. And look, Jim's right. I've had friends who are teachers call me and say, you've got to get in front of this train. And I've had friends and say, if you don't hush, I'm going to throw you from this train. So it's both ways. It's both ways. Right.
One of the things too is if you support it or don't, one of the worst things
You
that
didn't even have
happens
that
is...
mic where they hear you, everybody can hear you.
No.
Did we get his thing?
Yeah.
Jim?
Yeah. I want to say this, and this is something that I do a lot, and others can too, and that is, recently on a statewide news network, it said Mississippi legislatures want to stop Common Core. And he followed it, and he took a clip of Melanie that says, Common Core needs to slow down. That's all it said, but you recognize Melanie's voice. And he says, what they don't tell you is the legislature passed it themselves. They passed it in 10. And
It was
never passed. But what I want to encourage you to do is this, whether you're for it or against it, listen to your newscast. And if they say something locally like that, call them. I called that one. I went to the Associated Press and I stopped it. And a couple other things. You know, you have to have rapid response if you're going to win this battle. Don't sit there and stew. Call them.
But it wasn't passed by your state legislature. It was not voted on by the national, by Congress or by your national senator. You know, I mean, so that is one of the things, you know, we've been attacked for. Well, why all of a sudden you hate this if you must have voted for it before? And we did.
Well,
Yes, sir.
question, but Melanie, don't you, the reason that the legislature didn't vote on it and the national Congress didn't vote on it, because they don't have the right to do that. You've already said that. We understand. So the question is, this is something that was led by ordinary citizens and elected representatives of this democracy. And by the way, well,
they were not.
okay, wait just the governors aren't elected. Hold on just a second.
But they overstep their boundaries an awful lot.
Maybe. All right, here's the question. The State Board of Education is appointed by whom in the state of Mississippi?
The secretary, the lieutenant governor, the speaker of the House, they all have.
Correct. So the State Board of Education that passed us joining the Common Core State Standard was approved by the State Board of Education.
Let me tell you, I have really tried hard to find the actions of those boards. I've reviewed the minutes of the Board of Education meetings over about a 3-year period of time. And if you've ever read our corporate minutes before, you know they're just about as broad as they can be. If you want to know details, you're not going to find them in corporate minutes. And there really are no details there. They do mention in some meetings where we got an update on the Race to the Top application. The in-house gave an update on the Race to the Top 2 or 3 times. But that's about all that ever says in the minutes. But I know, because I've written corporate minutes, if somebody votes on something, it needs to be reflected in the minutes. And I've never, if it's there, I have not found it. And I've reviewed those minutes.
Let me
Did they?
Well, and let me say something. Just because, all right, let's say, all right, I'm going to give you the benefit of the doubt. Let's say the Department of Education, governors, I don't really care who it is. But if the people don't want it, do we not have the right to say something?
Oh, you have the right.
Yeah.
But you don't represent all of the people.
But if we don't agree, we have the right to let them know.
Absolutely, absolutely.
Let me tell you about the timeline for the Race to the Top applications, because this is really kind of revealing. In November of 2009 was when the first application period when states could apply for Race to the Top funds. What's going on in November? And you had 2 months to get your application in. Deadline was in January. What's going on in November, December, January?
Presidential election.
We were paying that, but schools are, you know, the holiday period, the legislature's not in session, and nobody's paying attention. Round 2 of the Race to the Top applications. Application period starts in June of 2010. You got till sometime in August, 2 months later, to get it in. Schools are in summer recess, legislature's not in session, everybody's on vacation, nobody's paying attention. Look, there was great strategy applied in doing all these things. You know, and I'm not excusing us as citizens. We better have our head in the game 365, 24/7 in this government. But to me, that was strategic. When you catch the citizens, when they're not paying attention, your legislature's not there, all that kind of stuff.
I got somebody else got a question.
I found where y'all were talking about the State Board of Education. I took this out, the ESEA waiver that was sent to the federal government. It's June 25th, 2010, and this tells you the basis as to why we had to rush into Common Core so fast. On a motion by Dr. O. Wayne Gann, seconded by Mr. Claude Hartley, the board voted unanimously to adopt the Common Core state standards for English language arts and literacy and history/social studies, science, and technical subjects as a temporary rule to become effective immediately based on a finding of imminent peril to public welfare and the loss of substantial federal funds from the Race to the Top grant, and that the board begin the Administrative Procedures Act process to adopt the Common Core state standards for English language arts and literacy and history, social studies, science, and technical subjects. So it was based on a finding of imminent peril to public welfare and the loss of substantial federal funds from the Race to the Top grant. Yes.
Excuse me.
Yes.
I wanted to ask that question, which I already knew the answer to. Only.
But we didn't get the money, so are we in imminent peril to the general welfare right now? That's the question.
My name is Bobby Riggs, and I own Dynamics Marine, which is a very high-tech offshore engineering company. We work in the offshore oil and gas business. I have a lot of engineering degrees. I worked all over the world. I have a lot of experience. My wife taught mathematics for 30 years in Louisiana, in St. Charles, one of the best parishes. The reason the United States is not #1 in education anymore is that the federal government got involved in it. That's right. People my age, I was from 66, which includes me. I'm 65. We're #1 in the world when they got out of school. Because the federal government had nothing to do with education whatsoever. Okay? The mathematics I took, the amazing new math that went in 1960, which started algebra in the 7th grade. It was done by the School Mathematics Study Group, Total Mathematics Teacher Study Group. Had nothing to do with administrators. Had nothing to do with school boards. Had nothing to do with the state or federal government, okay? If you will look, everybody's complaining about the standards. There's nothing wrong with what the subjects that are listed there in Common Core for what the children should know how to do are perfect. They're really no different mathematically than School Mathematics Study Group from the 60s. Which revolutionized education in the United States. What is wrong with the program is testing, requirement, expelling children, closing schools if the testing is not up to standards. Now what do you do if you have a whole school full of children that are substandard? There's nobody at home to help them. Their mom and dad are uneducated. How are you going to pass those standards? You're not. Okay? Are your teachers going to stay there? Of course not. Your teacher's going to get up and leave. Okay? That's what's wrong with No Child Left Behind. No Child Left Behind killed the last remnant of education in this country, okay? Period. And the only reason that anyone signed up for the core standards is you got a waiver from No Child Left Behind from the Obama administration. And
You got a question, Bobby?
money from the Obama administration.
You got a question, Bobby?
Yeah. Why are we doing this?
Why are we doing this meeting, or why are we doing?
Why are we doing Common Core?
That is the $64,000 question. Let me see if I can put a bow around all this, because, you know, we could talk about this all night and we're not getting anywhere. It is clear that some fine people in this room sit on one side of opinion on Common Core standards, and some fine people sit on the other. The problem with Common Core is it was slipped in when we weren't paying attention. It is not a state-led movement representative of the people. It's just not. But we need to get involved in it. It may be a little late, but I'm with Angela, it's never too late. So the whole point of it is to say, folks, let's come together and really appeal to our legislators to open this up, and let's look at what is really good for Mississippi schools. Let's don't quit pouring good money after bad. Let's just don't. So my message to you tonight is call your state legislator, know who that is, and call them and write them an email. Contact the speaker, contact the lieutenant governor, contact the House Education Chair, John Moore, the Senate Education Chair, Gray Tollison, let them know how you feel. Contact the governor's office and his education policy advisor, Lori Smith. Let them know how you feel. It is our government, it's our public schools, and we need to be involved. That's all I'm going to say tonight.
Rita, just in closing, I want to, because I don't like closing anything without, what are we going to do?
Can I say something?
What are we going to do? What are the next? Bobby, do you have a question?
I know might be off the chain, but did y'all get the PER? Is it PERS fixed?
Yes.
Because I'm going to tell you why a lot of the money's wasted. Oh, Bobby Thomas, I'm going to give her credit. I always call her House Senate District 92, Rebecca Carey. I'm in her district from I was one of those 70 babies to you that the schools in the kid in the South. But what I wanted to say, I used to head Jacob Nursing Home at Mississippi State Hospital at night, for my main job was at VA, but I'm in school now to be a clinical psychologist, where a lot of money is wasted. Let me see what would be the word I would call it. Nurses' aides, they got one called a nurses' aide supervisor, and they are able to schedule employees overtime, and that's where all the money goes. Maybe $44,000 for people that hadn't even went to high school. Graduated. And y'all said there, when something could be stopped, there is where a lot of money is being wasted right there. And what about the free phones?
Money. Just one second. Real quick, I do want to let you know, I'm going to run back here, but real quick, I do want to let you know kind of what do we do? What do we do next?
That's my question.
I will say that we started with several other senators that we work with before session ended and before the special session came, screaming, can we put the brakes on? Will you call for education to be a part of the special session and let us put the brakes on? Because we had teachers calling us saying we're spending a lot of money, we don't think it's the direction to go in. We didn't get that done. They didn't get that done. We will come back this next session and ask if we can put the brakes on it. If we can stop. Just stop where you are. We know you've spent a lot of money, just don't do anything else. Let us continue to research, let us figure out if there are parts we need that we don't need. More importantly, we think we need to do what some of these other states have done. We don't need to fall under the federal government on this. There may be some things in Common Core we want to take one, we don't. I will tell you that Angela was very instrumental in putting this together. This is a 4-page letter to the Department of Education directed to Dr. House that went out to her today. We will be releasing a press release on it tomorrow. And like I said, there are 4 pages, there are 14 questions that we aim directly at the Department of Education, that we think the Department of Education owes you, the taxpayers, an answer on. We are very skeptical about the fact that they will want to answer a lot of these questions. And if they don't, I think that sends a message to you. So I tell you this because I want you to be paying attention to your local media, whether it's the paper or the television media, because they're going to be covering it, because more people have been made aware. These questions, we will make them available online. If you want a copy of these questions that we sent to the Department of Ed, if you'll leave your name on something on the paper or email address, we'll make sure we send them to you.
You got a question back here,
Timothy, yes.
Well, I guess I need to introduce myself. I'm Timothy McGee. I'm a homeschool high school student. And my question is this.
Thank you for being here.
I heard somebody say that the federal Congress never voted on Common Core.
Correct.
But if the Mississippi Department of Education had to adopt Common Core to maintain federal funds, weren't the federal funds voted on by the U.S. Congress?
The Department of Ed, guys, this is one of the things. We met with the governor this week, and there were a lot of your top elected officials there. And I'm not going to call them out here. But I will tell you, this was a comment that was said. The Department of Education in Mississippi is accountable to no one. We give them full taxing authority. They want to raise your millage in this county. There is nothing you can do about it. So, and they do it every year. So we make them accountable to no one, and we give them full taxing authority to raise your taxes and keep spending money, and no one can stop them. And the comment was made in that meeting that we had at the Sellers Building in Jackson, until the legislature steps up and does something about that, nothing's going to change. And I hate to put it like that, but it's going to be hard. You tell me, if you give somebody full authority without being accountable, and give them the ability to tax all the money that they want, how are you going to stop that? How are you going to stop that? I do think it is far past time that citizens step up and speak.
Absolutely.
People constantly say, well, they raised my millage again. How do they do that? They've been given the authority to do that. So Becky was right. If you don't call these folks, let everybody know. Put it in the paper. Write letters. Talk to it about your press. Let them know. Yes, Dr.
I want you to stop that, if you will. That'll be your job.
It will be daunting.
Nobody has the right to do it. That is wrong.
It'll be daunting. And some people will say, well, why isn't that just easy to stop? And it is sad. I had a teacher come to me tonight that told me, I'm not sure I have a big problem with the standards. I've got a huge problem with the federal government telling me how to teach when I've been doing it for 20 years. And so but they're chasing the money. They're chasing the money. And until we can do something about the money, it's going to be hard because the teachers are terrified, the administrators are protecting the money. It's a really catch-22 situation.
And I want to say one thing on the standards that really caught my attention and made me really try to pay closer attention. Rita mentioned the Fordham Institute playing a big role in the promotion of Common Core, and they were commissioned by the Gates Foundation to do an alignment study between all the states' standards, current math and language arts standards, and the Common Core. And when you look at the Gates, the Fordham's assessment of Mississippi's English language arts and their alignment, you will see a totally different analysis and alignment study than the group that the Mississippi Department of Education contracted with called SEDL Comprehensive out of Georgia. SEDL said that Mississippi's language arts standards were of similar rigor and very closely aligned to Common Core, and they wouldn't take much work. And then the Fordham Institute, who is the Common Core mouthpiece ordained by Gates and these consortia to promote Common Core and to look at the alignment, they said the exact opposite. They said Mississippi language arts were among the worst in the country. So you tell me, who's right? Is it the Fordham Institute that's doing the alignment study commissioned by Gates, or is it this SEDL group out of Georgia that's been, designated to align Mississippi standards to Common Core? Can we trust when we have this type of disparaging alignment studies? And I mean, I pulled it straight out of this No Child Left Behind waiver flexibility request of what SEDL said. Then I pulled up Fordham because I got that from the Jeb Bush group. And I looked at it and I'm like, oh my gosh, something has got to be looked at, okay? That is such a conflicting analysis of these sets of standards by these two different groups that have, have played a big role in it. So, that's where I am. I want the best for the kids. I'm not against anybody in any public school. I'm not against any administrator who's trying to be protective. And the thing is, we got on this to compete for Race to the Top grant. We didn't get any of it, okay? We jumped in to compete for that big chunk of money, but we didn't get any. So, other states are surviving without Common Core, so that tells you what? Guess what? Mississippi can survive if we have to and if we figure out that that's the best thing to do. So I'm looking at it from like a teacher standpoint. I'm a facts type of person. I look and read, and I found all this stuff, just by going and looking and pulling through manuals and things. And so, I'm real confused as to whether our standards are of equal alignment and rigor of Common Core or if they're the worst in the country. So it just depends on who you ask. So thank you very much. Yes.
Anybody else got a question other than Timothy? All right, Timothy.
Okay, well, if the federal government did not vote on Common Core, then why would we have to adopt Common Core to compete for the race?
Because the federal agencies are acting as a legislative body in absentia is what they're doing. And we've got state agencies that are doing the same thing, and that's what we are trying to collectively get a handle on, because it has become the fact that these agencies have more power than an elected body. And that's wrong, and that's not the way this government was set up. Yes.
But this was a federal agency, the federal government that pushed us to adopt Common Core, correct?
Yes, this was pushed by the Arne Duncan administration since it started before Obama, but it was pushed into play through Arne Duncan and these other interested parties that Rita had on the slideshow.
Yeah, who got left behind was George W. Bush.
Exactly. Biggest mistake we ever had that I can remember in my lifetime.
I remember him bugging Ted Kennedy.
Yes.
So am I correct, I mean, that it's not a state-led initiative, but a federal-led initiative?
Well, more or less, yes. But yeah, I didn't agree with No Child Left Behind. I taught before and I taught after, and I could do a much better job before. So, yeah. If you're a teacher and you're trying to do your job, all you're being is hindered from doing the best job that you can do by all these regulations that never make anything better. Anytime you make a teacher have to document and do more paperwork, that's less time that they can spend with a student. And that's what I've been trying to preach since I got into the legislature, because it really hindered me from doing the things that I needed to do as far as interacting with my students. And if you have to have a scripted lesson, you don't need to be in the classroom.
Well, what y'all seen tonight is a lot of, I just pray we can work out our problems peacefully in this country. It's looking more and more like to me that we're not going to be able to. But you know, we need to respect one another, but the truth is going to prevail in the end, I promise you. I heard a guy say one time, you can never go wrong by doing what's right. And it's true. So if this is wrong, we need to do what's right? And just 2 points in my mind. I could have made pretty good in school when I went, but I had my mind on other things. But when I got to college, I did get the Outstanding Achievement Award, because I went out there working the Gulf Roustabout for about 6 years. I had a different outlook, and I was really motivated then. I got tired of pushing the grocery carts. But, I don't know why I said that. But anyway, I lost my train of thought. We need to take action here in Mississippi. The two most important points to me is the parents are losing any say, pretty much. You got to say when you get home, but from what I'm saying about this, you're going to lose a lot of your say. And the teachers. I mean, look what's going on in Washington. We got a government that can't balance the budget. It ain't that they can't. They don't even want to. And can we trust these people? We got states now that can't balance a budget. Are you going to trust them with your children's education? Well, I hope you don't. And I'm just watching what's going on with my kids in public school, and it seems like all the focus is now on the test. And I don't believe kids are learning. I don't claim to be really intelligent. I do not believe they're learning what we did in school. That's my opinion. Everybody here's got an opinion. But, and we're not coming up from the bottom. Mississippi's not. But I believe we can. I do believe we can. But if we leave God out of the equation, it don't even matter what we do. In the end, we're still going to lose. So we got to return back to Him. Got a man like I got a question.
My name's Darrell Dixon. I'm just a regular old citizen. I got 2 kids in school. They make straight A's. But they tell me when they got to take these tests, they're memorizing the test. Once you take the test, 2 weeks later, you ask them a question. I can't tell you. They memorize.
That's kind of what I was you said that's good, like what you said that. And I wish that, I hope the teachers that are here feel, we probably don't need no matter, but y'all teachers, y'all know what's going on. I've been teaching for years, just like what she said. It's just like you just got to go read by this script, basically. You do everything like they say. Well, the teacher's right there on the front line. Imagine a doctor having to do that that's working on you. You laying there with open heart surgery, and he got just a manual that he got to go by. He can't use his head. You know what I'm saying? Or a pilot. Computers and books are good, but Sometimes the human brain is the best thing that's ever been invented, because God invented it. Okay? Any other questions? We're glad you came tonight. We got some brochures back there. I hope this will be prosperous to you. There's probably many more questions that y'all have got. But glad you came, and we try to stay on top of the issues here at Brookhaven Tea Party. We meet here on the third Monday of every month, 6 o'clock.